Imagine it's 40,000 years ago. You wake up in a cave. You are cold. You are hungry. And your hair, your glorious matted, never been washed hair, is down past your waist. You didn't choose this hairstyle. There was no barber. There was no mirror. There wasn't even a comb. You have been growing this hair since the day you were born, and it has never once been cut. Now here's the uncomfortable part. That hair is not just annoying, it is dangerous. It gets caught in bushes while you're being chased by a hyena. It freezes solid in winter, turning into an ice cape that could snap right off. It becomes a five-star hotel for lice, ticks, and things that will make you extremely sick. Here's the wild part. If your ancestors never figured out how to manage this, how to cut, tie, shave, or burn their hair, you might not be here right now reading this sentence. Infections from lice-borne disease wiped out entire groups of early humans. Hair caught in a trap, a fire, or a predator's jaw ended bloodlines instantly. So today we're answering a question that sounds simple, but is actually one of the strangest survival stories in human history. How did ancient humans, with zero metal, zero scissors, and zero YouTube tutorials, actually cut their hair? Spoiler, the answer involves seashells, shark teeth, volcanic glass, urine, and a surprising amount of trust between total strangers. Let's dig in. Let's set the scene properly. Human hair grows about half an inch every month. It never really stops. Unlike a wolf's fur, which grows to a certain length and then sheds, human head hair just keeps going. This is actually really unusual in the animal kingdom. Scientists call this the anagen phase. That's just the fancy word for actively growing hair follicle. Think of it like a garden hose that never gets turned off. In humans, that hose runs for years before it finally shuts off on its own. So why would evolution do this to us? Here's subproblem number 1, thermoregulation. Long head hair likely helped protect our brains from the brutal African sun as we evolved to walk upright and lose most of our body fur. Great for sun protection, terrible for everything else. Subproblem number 2, parasite load. Long unmanaged hair is basically an apartment complex for head lice. And lice aren't just itchy. They can carry diseases like epidemic typhus, which has killed more humans throughout history than most wars combined. Subproblem number 3, and this one's darker. Survival mechanics. Predators grab hair. Enemies grab hair. Long hair can get snagged on branches, caught in early tools, or even wrapped around a baby during childbirth. In a world with no hospitals, something as small as tangled hair could be the difference between living and dying. So our ancestors were stuck with a biological glitch, hair that wouldn't stop growing in a world that punished you for having too much of it. But here's where it gets even weirder, because early humans didn't have the tools we'd assumed they needed to fix this. No steel, no scissors, not even bronze for most of human history. So how do you cut something as tough as hair with nothing but rocks in your bare hands? That single question shaped grooming, social bonding, and even fashion for the next 300,000 years. Let's find out how they cracked it. Here's the twist nobody expects. Cutting your own hair alone was almost never how it worked. Ancient haircuts were a team sport. Stage 1 of the solution goes back over 1 million years to Homo erectus. These early humans didn't have scissors, but they did have something almost as useful: napped stone tools. That's the process of striking a rock, usually flint or obsidian, to chip off razor-sharp flakes. Obsidian, which is just volcanic glass, is wild because when it breaks, the edge can be sharper than a modern surgical scalpel, sometimes only a few nanometers thick. Early humans figured this out purely by trial and error, probably after a lot of very painful mistakes. Stage 2 of the solution is where it gets social. Grooming another person's hair, picking through it, removing bugs, and eventually cutting it, became one of the earliest forms of social bonding. Primatologists actually see this in chimpanzees and bonobos today. It's called allogrooming, which just means grooming someone else instead of yourself. For early humans, allogrooming wasn't just about lice removal. It built trust. It built alliances. If you let someone hold a razor-sharp rock next to your throat, You had to really, truly trust them. That trust cemented tribes together. Stage 3. Specialization. As human societies grew larger, think early farming villages around 10,000 years ago, some people simply got better at this than others. Historians believe this is one of the earliest forms of specialized labor, right alongside toolmaking and food preparation. Congratulations! You've just witnessed the birth of the world's first barbershop, and it didn't even have a striped pole yet. Stage 4 takes us to the Bronze and Iron Ages, when actual metal razors started showing up in Egypt and Mesopotamia around 3000 BCE. These were often shaped like little hatchets, and they were expensive. Owning one was a status symbol, similar to owning a nice car today. So the solution to the hair problem wasn't a single invention. It was a slow-building relay race. Sharp rocks, then social trust, then specialized barbers, then metal tools. And once humans had reliable ways to cut hair, things got interesting. Because now, hair wasn't just a hygiene problem, it became a canvas. Fact 1. Shark teeth were legit hair-cutting tools. In parts of Polynesia and coastal regions of the Americas, ancient peoples used the serrated teeth of sharks, tied to wooden handles, as combs and cutting tools. Fact 2. Clamshells were the original tweezer scissors. Sharpened clam or mussel shells, when pinched together, could actually trim small sections of hair, almost like primitive scissors. Fact 3. Fire was a legitimate hair-cutting method. Yes, singeing. In several ancient cultures, especially where sharp tools were scarce, people would carefully pass a flaming stick or ember close to the hair to burn off the ends. Fact 4. Pumice stones were used like ancient razors. Ancient Greeks and Romans used it constantly for grooming. Fact 5. Head lice combs are one of the oldest tools ever found. A wooden lice comb discovered in Israel dates back roughly 3,700 years and even has an inscription on it. Fact 6. Grief and mourning were often expressed by cutting hair off entirely. In many ancient cultures, from the Egyptians to early Jewish traditions to various indigenous groups across the Americas, cutting or shaving your hair after a loved one's death was a visible, physical marker of mourning. Fact 7. Hair was recycled into rope, nets, and even bowstrings. Nothing went to waste. Cut hair was often woven into cordage for fishing nets, snares, and bindings. Human hair is surprisingly strong. A single strand can hold several ounces, and braided together, it becomes genuinely useful rope. Fact 8. Urine was actually used as a hair treatment. Stay with me here. Ancient Romans, and some other cultures, used fermented urine, yes, really, as a cleaning and even lightening agent for hair, because the ammonia inside acts as a natural bleaching and cleansing agent. It's gross by today's standards, but chemically? Not wrong. But here's where it gets even weirder, because none of this was uniform. Every region on Earth developed wildly different rituals, tools, and meanings around hair. Let's travel the globe. Let's start in ancient Egypt, around 3000 BCE. Heat, sand, and lice made long hair genuinely miserable. So many Egyptians, men and women, shaved their heads completely bald. But here's the twist. They didn't want to look bald. So they wore elaborate wigs made of human hair, wool, or plant fiber, often held together with beeswax and resin. Wealthy Egyptians even had specific wig styles denoting social class, almost like ancient business cards. A messy wig meant you were poor. A perfectly braided oiled wig meant you were basically ancient, royalty adjacent. Now travel to feudal Japan. Samurai wore a hairstyle called the shonmage, that partially shaved top with a small ponytail folded forward. It wasn't just fashion. It served a practical purpose, keeping a heavy iron helmet stable and comfortable during hours of combat. Losing your topknot in Japanese warrior culture was often seen as a massive public humiliation, almost equivalent to losing your rank entirely. Hair wasn't vanity, it was reputation. Now let's go to the Norse Vikings. Contrary to the shaggy, wild-haired image pop culture gives them, many Vikings were actually meticulous about grooming. Archaeological digs have found combs, tweezers, and ear cleaners in Viking burial sites. More grooming tools per person than in some later medieval European sites. Vikings reportedly bathed and groomed weekly, which, for the time period, was borderline obsessive. Some historical accounts even suggest Viking men were considered unusually attractive by neighboring cultures, specifically because of how well groomed they were. Now, to indigenous cultures of North America. Many tribes, such as the Lakota and other Plains nations, saw hair as spiritually significant, a physical extension of a person's identity, strength, and connection to their ancestors. Cutting hair was often reserved specifically for moments of deep mourning or major life transitions, not routine maintenance. This is a sharp contrast to Egypt, where cutting hair was practical hygiene, or Japan, where it was military function. Here, hair held spiritual weight. Cutting it wasn't taken lightly. And finally, various cultures across sub-Saharan Africa developed some of the most intricate hair cutting and styling traditions in human history. In many West African societies, hairstyles indicated tribal identity, age, marital status, and even wealth, all communicated visually, without a single word spoken. Specific comb tools, some dating back thousands of years, have been found with elaborately carved handles, suggesting hairdressing was considered both a practical skill and an art form. But here's where it gets even weirder. Across all these wildly different cultures, separated by oceans and thousands of years, one thing stayed exactly the same. Hair was never just hair. It was medicine, status, grief, identity, and community, all rolled into a few inches of keratin. Now let's fast forward to today. You walk into a barbershop or salon. You sit in a chair. Someone you may have never met before puts sharp metal tools near your head, and you don't think twice about it. That casual trust? That's a direct descendant of allo-grooming behavior that started over 1,000,000 years ago. You just don't realize it, because it's wrapped in fluorescent lighting and a magazine rack instead of firelight and shared danger. Here's what we gained. Sterilized tools. Actual scissors that don't accidentally slice your ear. Hygiene standards. Medicine for lice and scalp infections that used to be genuinely deadly. We solved almost every biological problem hair ever caused us. But here's the quieter, sadder part. For most of human history, a haircut wasn't a 15-minute transaction. It was connection. It was a mother grooming her child while telling stories. It was warriors trusting each other with blades near their throats. It was an entire village communicating identity, loss, and belonging through hairstyle alone. Today, most of us get our hair cut by a stranger, in silence, staring at our phones, and then we leave without saying much more than, thanks. We didn't just lose lice. We may have quietly lost a tiny piece of something ancient humans had constantly, almost without thinking. Touch, trust, and time spent with each other for no reason other than care. So the next time you sit in that chair, and someone gently tilts your head forward with practiced hands, remember, you're participating in one of the oldest rituals of trust in human history. Long before scissors, before mirrors, before shampoo commercials, our ancestors figured out that grooming each other wasn't a chore. It was one of the very first ways we said, without any words at all, I trust you. You're one of us. They didn't have scissors. They didn't have mirrors. They didn't have hospitals if something went wrong. But they had each other. And somehow, that was enough.